those vaccinated and for those who have completed full-course vaccination for people above 80 years old, 76.6% and 65.8% respectively of the people above 80 years old, among which 46 million have received the nasal inhaling adenovirus vaccines.
The new work plan in which we are going to take stock the baseline and optimize our services and publicity. Going forward, we will earnestly implement the requirements of the State Council and carefully organize and implement the vaccination work around the country, especially focusing on the elderly population. I also hope those elderly population, especially those over 80 years old, please take your own initiative to vaccinate and protect your own health. Thank you.
We're just going to continue monitoring this, but my interpretation of some of the market reaction around this, and we've only had about 13 minutes of this State Council press conference so far, is that the markets are actually a little bit disappointed with the fact that there is no dramatic pivot or change in strategy at this stage. What we've heard so far this morning is a commitment from the health authorities for a more rapid vaccination program for the elderly and the over 80s. We've also had a line here where effectively complaints about the COVID process are being pushed back on, with officials saying the complaints are about the one-size-fits-all approach, not about the COVID measures per se. So it's a reframing by the authorities of how they see the vigils and the protests in various cities across the country. I'm not quite sure what the market, well, I know what the market was hoping for. The market was hoping for a line that said we are now going to live with COVID and there will be more rapid implementation of vaccination using foreign supplied vaccines, but that is not what we're hearing from this event so far.
We were discussing this in the first hour of the show. How does China do an about face without losing face? And effectively, I think a lot of the language today is about not losing face. So you've got still a huge reliance on the testing regime. You were just hearing there about the various different days of testing. Also, if you do have a COVID case, you're still bundled off to a facility. I mean, that is just classic China COVID measures. So we're still hearing that. And if we talk about the fear factor for anyone going into China or fessing up that they have COVID, and no one really wants to be taken away from their family and put into one of these facilities. So I think there might still be a level of unrest about that particular concept. The other one, massaging this message around it was the one-size-fits-all policy. That allows for some room to push back and say, well, it was that local authority. They mishandled it. They didn't interpret the laws correctly. So there is a little bit of leeway, isn't there, on the communications strategy there for a blame game to happen if we do get protests in various cities. Just in terms of that vaccine where you started, you mentioned the ramped-up program. I mean, that is very early Western strategy, COVID days, where we saw a very rapid rollout of the vaccine. 3 months later, get the second booster as well. So very much playbook from the West in some ways. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it was interesting, our first guest on the programme, Duncan Wrigley, who joined us much earlier this morning, was just giving us a sense of how there is a two-way street at play here between the central government and the regional authorities. So the diktat comes from central government, but it's limited in terms of the specifics. So it's open to interpretation how the regional governments then implement the strategy, which to a certain extent is generating frustration among the population who feel that the lockdowns are too draconian on a small number of cases. But it gives the central government a bit of an out when it comes to who is responsible for this, because the party itself can say, well, you know, we didn't expect them to implement in quite this way, and hopefully it diverts the criticism back to the local government. And I think we were watching this press conference hoping that we might get some more specifics and some much tighter guidelines being sent down to regional authorities about how they manage individual cases. But I don't think that is happening here, and it does feel as though the markets are, eyes open and hoping, but not hearing necessarily what they want to at this stage. But it's still going on. You never know. We might get something new, but we do seem to be backing away from some of the highs.
I mean, what we're seeing, the work in progress here, is how an authoritarian government will conduct itself in the face of a crisis. I mean, that is what's coming through here. And we were talking earlier about the social contract, one that some believe is broken, that the government has overstepped, that they're not delivering on the economic and social promises, hence the pushback. But what does an authoritarian government do in that type of context? Do they U-turn? Well, they don't, do they? Because one protest can lead to another protest, and suddenly you're showing people, if they protest, that they can change outcomes. And that's not what the government wants to achieve at this point. And we had the Foxconn story first up, and now we've had these sort of nationwide protests in various different cities across China. I think there is a sort of tightrope for them to walk. If they respond, then they give protesters, would-be protesters, leeway to protest in future, or they're going to have to crack down. And the other option is that if you don't respond, then you could further fuel this type of unrest. So it is a tightrope that they're walking. We're seeing the inner workings of that play out through this committee, through this briefing today. I think it's just fascinating.